Do you have an interest in learning a new language or enhancing your skills as a foreign language teacher? Today we would like to introduce you to CALA, or the Center for Accelerated Language Acquisition, located within the Honors College of Middle Tennessee State University. CALA was founded in 2003 by Dr. Shelley Thomas of the University Honors College. Shelley talks about the formative beginnings of this program.
Well, back in 1997, I went to a professional conference, ACTFL, and at this conference there was a gentleman who gave a presentation on TPRS. I didn't know what that was at the time, but it's Teaching Proficiency through Reading and Storytelling, and it was Blaine Ray. And during this demonstration, I could understand everything he was saying, and it was funny, and I just thought, wow, what just happened to me? So I decided to research it more, and I took a sabbatical, and I got some more training on it, and I met some other teachers that were just learning about it, and we all said, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could have some sort of a workshop in the summer and get Blaine to come and teach us another language and just see how quickly we could learn. Well, everybody else was a high school teacher, and I was the only university professor, so I applied for a grant, the Special Projects Grant, and I got it, and I brought Blaine in, and I brought in all these teachers, and local teachers too, and we sat with Blaine for 25 hours and learned Spanish, and then we took the National Spanish Test. And the results were so good that various deans on campus continued to support this and give me monies, and that began the Language Institute.
Dr. Thomas has completed a 3-year certification on brain-based learning and uses her knowledge to create a learning experience that results in fast, unconscious, long-term acquisition of languages. She explains to us how learning a second language is very similar to how we learn our first.
James J. Asher did research in California, he's in the Department of Psychology, on the acquisition of languages. And he looked at children in particular, and he noticed that parents were giving their children commands at a very early age. Look at mommy, take a bite of this cereal. And he decided to repeat that with one of his graduate students who taught Japanese. And he invited the graduate student to start acting out commands that he was actually giving Asher in Japanese. And the retention that Asher experienced was phenomenal. So he started to make a rapport between all the qualities that happen in first language acquisition, and he started repeating them and imitating them in second language acquisition. And one of the reasons that works so well, we now know from brain research, is that appeals to one of the most fixed memory pathways. There are 4 major memory pathways, and the most fixed one is conditioned response, and that's for example, if we touch a hot pan, we draw back immediately. Another memory pathway that's very fixed is procedural, when we learn how to ride a bike. And those are the memory pathways that TPR, total physical response, that Asher created, or that discovered, appeals to. So definitely we base our curriculum and our lesson plans on this discovery of Asher, and then Krashen, who is a well-known linguist. Dr. Stephen Krashen, also from California, put forth the comprehensible input theory, and which just simply says, if the target language in the classroom is made comprehensible, and we know in order for that to be brain compatible, it needs to be enjoyable, repetitive, novel, interesting, then language acquisition takes place. So based on what we know about language acquisition from Asher, Krashen, and then I added Eric Jensen to the mix, because when I learned about these methods in foreign languages, I turned to the neurosciences, and the person who's teaching teachers about neuroscience is the best, and how research applies directly to the classroom is Eric Jensen. He's the foremost teacher trainer in the country. Asher calls it brain switching, going from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is more analytical, and the right hemisphere is more kinesthetic. And when we were younger, it was natural for us to be more right hemisphere dominated. We were uninhibited, we weren't analytical. But about age 11, brain lateralization took place, and there was a separation, and we became more left brain dominant. And that's natural because we need to protect ourselves. It's a survival mechanism. So we are linear thinkers, we're analyzing, but that's one of the things that impedes language acquisition if we're trying to model the first language acquisition model. In the first language acquisition model, we were uninhibited, and it was easy to come through the right hemisphere. Now as adults, we're going to have to allay the fears of the left hemisphere and teach our students that they can be uninhibited. And that's one of the reasons that Jensen teaches us as teachers who are going to be teaching according to brain research, that we need to bond with students first. So before I teach anything in a foreign language, I spend a lot of time with the students, asking them questions, having icebreakers, and helping them understand what's going to happen in class based on brain research so that they can be collaborators in their own learning process. Because every student is different, they're going to pick up the language at a different rate, and they need to understand that they can work with their brain and they can work with their rate and their different learning styles, because what's going to happen in class are so many different activities that each learning style is going to be addressed.
In Phase 1 of the program, Total Physical Response, or TPR, learners have physical experiences with a core set of high-frequency vocabulary words and about a dozen grammatical structures. The experience of walking, drawing, playing games and touching the vocabulary contributes to moving learning into long-term memory.
So TPR stands for Total Physical Response, and that focuses on vocabulary that is what we call concrete, and that's vocabulary that needs no translation. For example, this is a hand, it needs no translation. This is touch, that needs no translation. Table. So anything that can be seen or acted out that needs no translation, that's called concrete vocabulary, and that's what TPR handles. And in the first few hours, we only deal with concrete vocabulary because English doesn't need to be spoken. We can act out what's happening in whatever language we're teaching. We can say touche la tête, or toque la cabeza, and everybody knows it's touch the head. So that TPR is just total physical response, and it deals with so many vocabulary words like clothes, numbers, house, rooms in the house, colors. So that takes care of quite a bit of vocabulary.
In Phase 2, Teaching Proficiency through Reading and Storytelling, TPRS, basic vocabulary words and grammatical structures are woven into stories that are performed and processed through a variety of activities designed to promote listening, speaking, reading, and writing fluency.
On that base, we build and we put TPRS, which is Teaching Proficiency through Reading and Storytelling. And on that concrete vocabulary, we hang abstract terms like I want, I need, I go, and we create stories and act them out. So we're still using fixed physical memory, but we're adding emotion and other parts of the brain that help memory go in, that help information go into long-term memory.
In Phase 3, students begin to read a simple novel in the new language. This phase introduces a few more words and grammatical structures and context, which leads to writing and talking in the new language. Brian Roberts, Spanish instructor and assistant director for CALA, tells us more about brain-based learning and its relationship to foreign language
is
education.
Something that the brain does very naturally. Every person just, by virtue of being born into the world, into a given culture, if they're given linguistic input in a regular way, their brain will kind of do the work. The brain is kind of a natural pattern seeker, and it will implicitly decipher the patterns of the language, and you learn the language. Without any kind of talk about grammar, without any kind of memorization or any of the things that we often do in a second language classroom. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just taking the premise that the brain is a natural language learner, and that if we give comprehensible input, if we give input to students and let them hear the language, hear the patterns, work with the patterns, reproduce the patterns in new and interesting and stimulating ways, we notice that people acquire the language very naturally without having to do any kind of memorization or explicit drilling. What CALA seeks to do is to piggyback on the brain's natural capacity for language learning. And we know that that capacity is diffused throughout the brain. It involves a number of sensory motor cortices, it involves emotion, it involves the limbic system. So everything that we do in the classroom is engineered to appeal to the way that the brain learns best, making sure that students feel engaged, that people are constantly interactive. We're incorporating body movement into it. That's yet another venue through which the brain makes associations between vocabulary and actions that it's doing in the world. So what we do at CALA is we seek to kind of recreate the way that you learned your first language. Lots of hands-on activity, lots of interaction, hearing the language over and over and over again in different contexts and different ways. We make it interesting, we make it fun. And what we find is when people are engaged and having fun, they learn very naturally. So the kind of comment that we often get is, folks, they come to class, at the end of class they say, wow, that was a blast. I didn't really realize that I was learning. I didn't know that I was learning. I just came to class, was having fun and enjoying it. So it's a very organic, very natural approach to learning language. It's a very social, very communal way of learning languages, which is also part of the way that the brain learns. It has that social dimension to it as well.
Shelley and Brian talk about how testing proves the CALA program to be very successful.
To be at an institution of higher learning where research can take place. Every time that we've had the Language Institute, I've had students take either the National Spanish Test or it's the Brigham Young Placement Test that's given all over the United States. When students come in from high school, let's say, and they've had 1 or 2 years of a foreign language, we give them this test. It's totally grammar-based, and based on that test, if they test into second semester or third semester, they go immediately to that semester, and if they take that class, then they get credit for the semester that they skipped. So based on the results that we've gotten from those tests, here's what we're seeing. After 35 hours or 10 days of learning with TPR and TPRS, students are testing out of, who have never had the foreign language before, anywhere from 1 semester of college or 1 year of high school to 4 semesters of college or 4 years of high school. And why there's this big difference is, what I explained before is there's a big difference between each brain. Some people are fast processors and some are slow processors. And with exposure to 35 hours of a foreign language, they may acquire and absorb things more quickly than other people in the class. So the results have been fantastic. They've just been published by Krashen in his International Journal of Foreign Language Teachers.
Back when I taught Department of Children's Services employees, we tested them on the National Spanish exam, which is an exam that students nationwide take as high school students. And we looked at the per hour gains for CALA students versus high school students. Now, CALA students had about 22 to 25 hours of instruction. High school students, after a year, that's about 180 hours of instruction. So per hour, CALA participants gained, now these are folks who had no background in Spanish. We were teaching them Spanish. And they gained on the order of 5 times as fast were their language gains, the points per hour that they gained, versus high school students with a year of Spanish. And those were statistically significant results. So we done testing, and indeed it does work.
At the end of the day, nothing speaks to the benefits of the CALA program like the enthusiasm of those students and foreign language teachers that have gone through the program.
I think it's something that is a lot of fun, and I enjoy learning languages, and I've had various teachers over the years. So I think this is a really great way to start a language. If it's a new language to someone, I think it's a great introduction to it because it's not intimidating.
I'll just say this was a great class. I did take 3 years of Spanish in high school, and I felt that I really didn't get anything out of it. It was just we didn't have this interaction, just everything we did in this class was interactive, from the worksheets we did, just the talking, and that really helped just kind of progress your learning. Where in high school it was just worksheet after worksheet after worksheet, and I was able to write it, but I really wasn't able to use it in a day-to-day basis.
They allowed you to do many activities that stimulate the brain for memory and for speaking. So we retained a lot through what we did instead of just looking at books and repeating words all the time, but repeating the words through activities that were fun.
My father's been learning Spanish for 7 years, and in 2 weeks I've been able to actually hold a in-depth conversation with him on what he's learned in 7 years versus what I've learned in 2 weeks. And I'll be honest, I was extremely apprehensive coming into the course because I was like, what can I learn in 2 weeks? I mean, hola, adios, those kind of things. I was like, I'll be able to do that. But it's absolutely amazed me with what I have been able to learn and what I've been able to retain. Not just learn it and then forget about it, but it's actually integrated into my long-term memory. I can talk with my husband a little bit about what I've learned, and he's taken 3 years of Spanish, and it's interesting to be able to have those kind of conversations in such a short period of time.
I had a really positive experience. The teacher was really helpful, and I really enjoyed the way that they taught. It was very hands-on. I would definitely recommend this class to others.
90% of it was conversational, and there was some writing, and that was good too. I enjoyed that, but even the worksheets that we would do, we would take off and make a new story using the words that we knew, and I thought that was really powerful to kind of be able to ad-lib and produce your own new story from the words rather than just fill in the blanks on worksheets. So.
Probably the best way to learn, I'm not gonna lie. It was really fun, and going through physical means I remembered it more easily.
I think that this class was like a very good preparatory phase for being actually immersed in the culture. But as far as acting out activities, and the more ridiculous, the easier your brain latches on to it and says, okay, well, that's absolutely insane. Why would I remember that? And then you remember it.
I would definitely recommend this class to others. It's a pretty good experience. Even though it's just 2 weeks, you can learn so much with other people.
I'll put it this way. I learned more in 2 weeks than I learned in 3 years in this course. So, I mean, if that's what you want to do, great. If you want to take your times, then you know what, take the longer course. But I learned most in this course, and it's going to be more grounded because of this course.
My experience was very good because I enjoyed the diverse activities. They had different ways of doing the same material, and I really will employ these when I start teaching.
Shelley tells us about CALA's foreign language teacher training workshops and why brain-based learning in a stress-free environment is essential.
Teacher training workshops and what that involves, the teachers are invited for week 1 to take a language that they have had no experience with so that they can feel what it feels like to be learning a language with no background, just like many of their students. So they experience the power of TPR and TPRS, and then they're curious in week 2 what makes it work. So in week 2, we explain the brain-based theories and why it works so well, and we start giving them coaching. And one of the things that Eric Jensen suggests is in order to help bond with students and manage the chemicals that their brains produce, the teacher has to be able to manage his or her own chemicals. And he points out that one of the ways that we do this naturally is through yoga and meditation. So I've added to the teacher training not only the experience of learning a language and looking at the brain research that supports it, but also bringing in a certified yoga teacher to help with relaxation techniques that can help the teachers go home and practice in their own home, something that will help them manage their own stress as they teach.
In addition to the authors, thinkers, educators, and administrators acknowledged in this video, CALA would like to give special thanks to Bertie Siegel Cook, longtime educator in the English as a Second Language classroom and author of many works, including Teaching English Through Action and the Practical Guide for the Bilingual Classroom. Bertie's training and personal encouragement paved the way for Dr. Shelley Thomas, as she brought TPR and TPRS to the CALA Language Institute, and Conti Seeley, author and publisher whose Command Performance Language Institute puts quality language learning materials into the hands of educators worldwide. Conti's generous intellectual and financial contributions have been invaluable to the growth and services offered by CALA. To learn about CALA and see class offerings, please visit the website.